Okay, so get ready because today we are going deep into some pretty intense stuff. The psychology of evil.
Oh,
We're going to be
yeah.
talking about how seemingly ordinary people cross the line and commit those acts of, incredible cruelty.
Right.
You sent me a ton of research and news articles that really explore this phenomenon.
Yeah, and this topic, has fascinated psychologists and philosophers for
Oh,
centuries.
absolutely.
What's really intriguing is that the boundary between good and evil is not as clear as we think.
Right.
It's more like a blurry line.
Yeah.
And what's even more surprising is how easily that line can be blurred.
Right.
We're going to be kind of dissecting the influence of situations, systems, social forces that transform individuals.
Absolutely. And one of the most famous examples of this is the Stanford Prison Experiment.
Oh, totally.
And, we've got excerpts from Philip Zimbardo's book, The Lucifer Effect, about
Yeah,
that,
that's a classic.
which has almost become a cautionary tale
Absolutely.
in the field of psychology.
What makes the Stanford Prison Experiment so compelling is how quickly the participants transform.
Yeah.
So Zimbardo created this mock prison in the basement of Stanford
Right.
and randomly assigned students to play the roles of either guards or prisoners.
Right. So going in, you have a group of, presumably normal college students.
Yeah.
No history of violence or sadism or anything like that.
Right.
And yet the guards, simply by being assigned that role,
Yes.
began exhibiting this disturbing behavior.
Exactly. And they embraced their authority with this shocking intensity.
Yeah.
What's particularly striking is the speed with which they dehumanized the prisoners,
Right.
treating them as less than human. They stripped them of their identities, subjected them to, psychological torment.
Yeah.
And the experiment had to be shut down after just 6 days because it just became so disturbing.
6 days.
Wow.
6 days.
It really makes you question how much our behavior is truly under our control.
It really does. Like if simply being assigned a role can have that much of a powerful effect, what does that say about our own ability to control our actions?
Yeah, and that's a crucial insight that we get from this experiment.
Right.
The Stanford Prison Experiment really throws into question that whole idea that good and evil are just these fixed traits within us.
Right.
It suggests that the circumstances, the roles we play, the systems that we're a part of can all exert tremendous influence on our behavior.
It's really scary to think about.
It is.
So dehumanization seems to be a key factor in enabling these acts of cruelty.
Yeah.
Zimbardo argues that it's a crucial step in turning ordinary people into perpetrators of violence.
Right.
And he even uses the chilling example of the Rwandan genocide where Hutu neighbors brutally murdered their Tutsi friends and colleagues.
Right.
And you sent some really heartbreaking material on that.
It's a tragic illustration of the horrific consequences of dehumanization.
Yeah, you mentioned those firsthand accounts, a Hutu mother forced to kill her neighbor's children. The government propaganda that was demonizing the Tutsis as enemies.
Right.
It's incredibly disturbing.
And what's so frightening is that this process of dehumanization often starts so subtly.
Right.
It starts with labels, stereotypes, and then gradually escalates to the point where this entire group of people is seen as subhuman, unworthy of, basic rights or dignity.
Yeah. Zimbardo calls this creating a hostile imagination.
Yeah.
And it's a terrifying concept.
It is.
It's like we build up this mental image of the other as a threat,
Right.
even when there's no real basis for it.
Yeah, you're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
Right.
We imagine a threat, and then we act in ways that create the very threat we imagined.
And often propaganda plays a significant role in this.
A huge role.
Think about how certain groups are portrayed in the media.
Totally.
How easily stereotypes and biases can be amplified and
Yes.
exploited to fuel this fear and this hatred.
Absolutely.
It's a powerful tool for both good and evil.
It is a double-edged sword.
So we've seen how situational forces
Yeah.
and dehumanization can contribute to these evil acts.
Yeah.
What about the role of obedience to authority?
Right.
We both have some material on Stanley Milgram's famous obedience experiments,
Yeah.
where participants were told to administer electric shocks to a learner every time they made a mistake.
Right.
Those were pretty controversial.
They were very controversial.
So Milgram's experiments revealed a truly unsettling aspect of human nature,
Yeah.
which is our willingness to obey authority figures,
Right.
even when it means inflicting harm on others.
Right.
Many participants believed that they were delivering real electric shocks,
Yeah.
and you can hear the learners screaming in pain.
Yeah.
But despite their distress, many continued to administer those shocks,
Right.
simply because they were told to by the experimenter.
It's almost as if our own moral compass gets overridden by the perceived authority of the person giving the orders.
It's really frightening.
It is.
Why do you think so many people were willing to continue, even though they were clearly uncomfortable?
Well, Milgram proposed that it's the situation itself,
Okay.
the power dynamic between the participant and the authority figure that creates this blind obedience.
Okay.
The participants feel obligated to obey, even if it means going against their own moral beliefs.
Wow.
And it's worth asking ourselves, have you ever felt that pressure to do something you knew wasn't right, just because someone in a position of authority told you to?
Right.
These experiments suggest that it's a more common experience than we might like to admit.
That's what makes this whole topic so disturbing, right?
It is disturbing.
It's not about, some distant other who is inherently evil.
Right.
It's about recognizing that potential for darkness within each of
It's in
us.
all of us.
Given the right or wrong set of circumstances,
Yeah.
any of us could be susceptible to these influences.
That's the unsettling truth that Zimbardo, Milgram, and others force us to confront.
Right.
But by understanding these psychological mechanisms,
Yeah.
by recognizing our own vulnerabilities,
Right.
perhaps we can start to build some safeguards against them.
Okay, so we've got Zimbardo's prison study,
Yeah.
Milgram's obedience experiments,
Yes.
and their concept of dehumanization as key factors in this whole equation of evil.
Totally.
Now let's shift gears and see how all of this plays out in a real-world context.
Okay.
The Abu Ghraib prison scandal.
Right.
You drew some interesting parallels between the Stanford Prison Experiment
Yeah.
and what happened at Abu Ghraib.
Yeah, the parallels are undeniable.
Yeah.
He analyzed the case of Chip Frederick, a staff sergeant who was involved in the abuses.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is that Frederick wasn't a sadist.
Okay.
Psychological assessment showed no signs of, any inherent cruelty.
Yeah.
Yet he participated in some truly horrific acts.
So if it wasn't sadism, what was it?
Well, the situation at Abu Ghraib was incredibly chaotic and stressful.
Right.
There was a lack of clear guidelines, inadequate training for the guards, and immense pressure to extract information from detainees.
Yeah.
It was a recipe for disaster.
And that's where the systemic issues come in, right?
Totally.
It wasn't just a few bad apples.
Right.
It was a system that, in many ways, enabled or even encouraged this kind of behavior.
Absolutely. Multiple investigations revealed leadership failures,
Right.
ambiguous orders from higher up, and a general lack of accountability.
Yeah.
This created a culture of impunity where abuse became almost inevitable.
It really highlights the danger of blindly following orders.
It does.
It seems like the soldiers at Abu Ghraib were operating this kind of moral vacuum
Yeah.
where the usual rules of conduct no longer applied.
Right.
It makes you wonder, how much personal responsibility can we truly assign
Yeah.
when individuals are operating within such a corrupt system?
That's a complex question.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the heart of this whole issue.
Right.
It's not just about individual culpability.
Right.
We have to consider the influence of the system itself.
So this brings us to this concept of resisting these evil influences.
Okay.
Despite all the darkness, Zimbardo also emphasizes that we are not powerless.
We're not.
He talked about the importance of fostering what he calls a heroic imagination.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean?
It's about recognizing that we all have the potential for both good and evil within us.
Okay.
It's about being aware of the situational forces that can lead us down a dark path, but also realizing that we have the capacity to resist those forces.
Okay.
A heroic imagination involves developing critical thinking skills,
Yeah.
questioning authority, and cultivating a strong sense of personal responsibility.
So it's about recognizing that we're not just passive bystanders in the world.
Exactly.
We have a choice to make, to
Wow.
either go along with the crowd, to obey blindly,
Right.
or to stand up for what we believe is right, even when it's difficult.
And he highlights some incredible examples of real-world heroes, people who acted courageously in incredibly challenging situations.
Yeah.
Individuals like Joe Darby, who exposed the Abu Ghraib abuses even though he knew it would come at a personal cost.
Yeah, think about those individuals in your own life who have demonstrated, courage and integrity in the face of adversity.
Right.
They may not be famous or anything like that, but their actions speak volumes.
They do.
And these examples remind us that even in the darkest of situations, there are always individuals who choose to be the light.
That's right.
They choose to act with compassion,
Yeah.
to speak out against injustice, even when it's risky.
Yes.
Their stories offer a powerful antidote to the despair that can come from, contemplating the psychology of evil.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we all have the potential for heroism within us. It's
Yeah.
about choosing to act on that potential, to cultivate that heroic imagination, and to make a positive difference in the world, no matter how small it may seem.
Absolutely.
Because even small acts of courage and kindness can have a ripple effect,
I agree.
inspiring others to do the same.
It's a powerful message of hope in the face of some truly disturbing realities.
It is.
All right, we're going to pause here for a moment, but we'll be back soon to delve even deeper into this fascinating and complex topic.
Looking forward to it.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the power of situations to shape behavior sometimes in truly horrific ways. We talked about Zimbardo's prison experiment, Milgram's obedience studies,
Yeah.
and even the chilling example of the Rwandan genocide.
Right.
Now, I'm really curious to kind of dive deeper into the specific psychological mechanisms at play
Okay.
that can turn ordinary people into perpetrators of evil.
Yeah, it's a fascinating and disturbing area of research.
Yeah.
One key mechanism is de-individuation.
Okay.
It's this process of losing your sense of individual identity,
Right.
becoming more anonymous, especially when you're part of a larger group.
So you're saying that when you're in a crowd, for example,
Yeah.
you feel less accountable for your actions.
Right.
Because you're not seen as an individual. I can see how that would lower inhibitions.
Precisely, when you're part of a mob, you're more likely to engage in behaviors that you wouldn't dream of doing if you were alone.
Right.
And easily identifiable.
Yeah.
There's a diffusion of responsibility.
Okay.
You might tell yourself, well, everyone else is doing it, or I'm just following orders.
It's almost like a collective mindset takes over.
Right.
And individual morality just gets kind of lost in the shuffle,
Yeah.
which explains why mobs can be so destructive. Speaking of roles, I'm thinking back to the Stanford Prison Experiment,
Okay.
where those students were assigned to be either guards or prisoners.
Right.
Zimbardo talks about how powerful those roles can become.
Roles are incredibly powerful because they come with this set of expectations and behaviors.
Right.
And we humans are social creatures.
Yeah.
We tend to conform to those expectations, even if they clash with our personal values.
Think about it. Have you ever started a new job and found yourself behaving differently, kind of adapting to the culture and expectations of that workplace?
All the time. It's like you're putting on a uniform or a costume.
Right.
You start to play the part.
Exactly.
And the longer you play the part, the more it can influence your thoughts, your feelings, even your sense of self.
Wow.
Can change your beliefs and values,
Really?
making it easier to justify actions that you might have once considered unthinkable.
That's a bit scary to think about.
It is. It's like we can become puppets of our roles, acting out a script that someone else has written.
Right.
Which is why it's so important to be aware of the roles we inhabit,
Okay.
to question those expectations, and to make sure that they align with our own moral compass.
Right.
We need to develop that critical thinking muscle.
So we've got de-individuation roles.
Yeah.
And of course, dehumanization, which we touched on earlier.
Right.
It's that process of stripping away someone's humanity, seeing them as less than human, the enemy.
And once you dehumanize someone, it becomes much easier to justify mistreating them, to inflict pain and suffering.
Right.
We see this in wartime propaganda all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Where the enemy is portrayed as, monstrous, savage, a threat to our very existence.
Right. The material that you sent over included some really disturbing research by Albert Bandura,
Oh, yeah.
the Stanford psychologist who studied moral disengagement.
Right.
His work is incredibly relevant here.
Bandura's research showed how people can disengage their moral compass, convincing themselves that it's okay to do things that they know are wrong.
Right.
He demonstrated that simply labeling a group of people as animals, for example,
Yeah.
increased the likelihood that participants would be willing to harm them.
It's chilling. It shows the power of language.
Yeah.
How the words we use can really shape our perceptions and actions.
Right.
When we use that dehumanizing language,
Yes.
we're essentially giving ourselves permission to mistreat others.
Think about how certain groups are portrayed in the media or online. Are those portrayals always fair and accurate? Or are there subtle forms of dehumanization at play?
It's something we need to be constantly aware of.
We do.
So to recap, we've got de-individuation roles and dehumanization all kind of working together
Right.
to create this perfect storm for evil to emerge.
Yes.
Are there any other psychological factors that we should be considering?
Well, one factor that often contributes to all of this is stress.
Okay.
When people are under extreme stress, they're more likely to make impulsive decisions, to
Right.
act out of fear or desperation.
Okay.
Their cognitive resources are depleted, and they're less able to think clearly and
So
ethically.
stress basically amplifies all these other negative influences.
Exactly.
It makes people more susceptible to things like de-individuation,
Right.
blind obedience, dehumanization.
We see this in the case of Chip Frederick at Abu Ghraib.
Right.
Remember, he wasn't a sadist by nature,
Right.
but the situation at Abu Ghraib was incredibly stressful. He
Yeah.
was working long hours, sleep deprived,
Yeah.
in a dangerous environment and under immense pressure to extract information from detainees.
Right.
It was a recipe for bad decisions.
It sounds like he was pushed to a breaking point.
Yeah.
And under those conditions, it's easier to understand how someone might abandon their moral principles.
That's the tragic reality. It's
Yeah.
not that these individuals are inherently evil, it's
Right.
that they're human.
Right.
And under extreme duress, our human capacity for both good and evil becomes more pronounced.
This is all pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure our listeners are wondering, what can we do with this knowledge?
Right.
How can we use it to prevent future atrocities?
Right.
Is there any hope?
Those are the questions that we all grapple with,
Mhm.
and there are no easy answers.
Yeah.
But I believe that awareness is the first step.
Right.
By understanding the psychology of evil,
Yeah.
by recognizing the situational forces that can lead ordinary people down a dark path,
Right.
we can start to build safeguards against them.
So it's about educating ourselves, educating others, raising awareness of these dangers
Absolutely.
so that we can be more vigilant, more resistant to those negative influences.
It's about recognizing our own vulnerabilities, developing critical thinking skills,
Right.
and cultivating a strong sense of personal responsibility.
That reminds me of those Milgram experiments.
Okay.
You know, those participants who went along with the instructions to administer those shocks,
Right.
even when they were clearly distressed.
Yeah,
It's a stark reminder of the danger of blind obedience.
absolutely. We need to be able to say no when something feels wrong, even when it means defying authority or going against the grain.
Yeah.
That takes courage,
Yeah.
but it's a muscle that we can all strengthen.
And finally, there's the piece about cultivating personal responsibility.
Yeah.
It's not enough to simply be aware of these dynamics.
Right.
We have to be willing to act.
Exactly. We're not just passive observers in this world.
Right.
We have a responsibility to act when we see injustice, to speak up against cruelty, to extend a helping hand to those who are suffering.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that our choices, both big and small,
Right.
have consequences and that we have the power to make a difference.
It's about choosing to be the hero, not the bystander,
Right.
and instilling that sense of agency and responsibility in the next generation.
Absolutely. We need to teach our children to be compassionate, to think critically,
Yeah.
and to have the courage to stand up for what they believe in.
Right.
They need to know that they have the potential to be heroes in their own right, each and every one of them.
This has been an incredibly thought-provoking deep dive.
It has.
We've explored, the dark side of human nature,
Right.
but we've also unearthed these glimmers of hope, these examples of incredible courage and resilience.
We have.
It's been a roller coaster of emotions.
It has.
The key takeaway here is that we all have the potential for both good and evil within us.
We do.
The choices we make, the actions we take,
Right.
ultimately determine which path we follow.
It's a powerful reminder that the world needs our heroic imaginations now more than ever.
Right.
We can choose to succumb to fear, hatred, and apathy,
Yeah.
or we can choose to be the force for good, the change that we want to see in the world.
It's a choice we all face every single day.
Every day.
And the more we understand about the psychology of evil,
Right.
the better equipped we'll be to make those choices wisely and courageously.
Absolutely.
We'll be back after a quick break to wrap up our deep dive into this fascinating and complex topic. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about the psychology of evil, how situational forces and systems can really nudge ordinary people towards, unthinkable acts.
Heavy stuff.
But amid all this darkness, we've also encountered, these flickers of hope.
Yeah.
These individuals who resisted these powerful influences and really just displayed incredible courage and compassion.
Absolutely.
It's a good reminder that the capacity for good exists within us as well.
It's so easy to get bogged down in the negativity, to feel overwhelmed by the cruelty that we see in the world. Yeah.
It's essential to remember that, those acts of heroism, kindness, and selflessness are far more common than we might realize.
That's true.
They often go unnoticed, uncelebrated, the everyday heroes quietly making a difference in their communities and the lives of those around them.
Right. That makes me think of Zimbardo's distinction between two types of heroism,
Yeah.
acute and chronic.
Uh-huh.
So acute heroism is what usually comes to mind when we think of heroes,
Right.
the sudden dramatic acts of bravery.
Yeah, like rescuing someone from a burning building.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But then there's this idea of chronic heroism.
Right.
What makes that different?
So think of chronic heroism as a sustained commitment to doing good.
Okay.
Even when it's hard, even when it's inconvenient or even risky.
Right.
It's about living a life that's defined by purpose and service to others, standing up for what's right, even when it's unpopular.
Okay.
We see this in individuals like, Nelson Mandela,
Right.
Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa.
Those who dedicated their lives to fighting for justice and positive change.
I see what you mean. It's less about the single grand gesture
Yeah.
and more about a lifetime of choices,
Yeah.
those everyday acts of courage and integrity.
Right, the little things that we do every day.
It makes me think about, the teachers who go above and beyond for their students year after year.
Right.
The volunteers who dedicate countless hours to their communities.
Yes.
That kind of quiet, sustained heroism, I feel like, often gets overlooked.
It does. It's happening all around us all the time.
Yeah.
These chronic heroes demonstrate that, it's not about waiting for some extraordinary moment to be heroic.
Right.
It's about the choices we make every day, the small acts of kindness and integrity that ripple outward and create a more compassionate and just world.
So how can we cultivate this heroic imagination?
That's the big question.
This capacity for good in ourselves and others.
Right.
How do we equip ourselves to resist those negative influences and make those courageous choices more consistently?
Well, Zimbardo offers some practical advice
Yeah.
that I think is spot on.
Yeah.
First, we need to be aware of the forces at play.
Okay.
The de-individuation, the dehumanization, the obedience to authority, the impact of stress.
Right.
We discussed all of that.
Yeah.
By understanding how these factors can sway our behavior, we can be more mindful
Yeah.
and develop strategies to resist their pull.
So step one is self-awareness, recognizing our own vulnerabilities.
That's right.
What comes next?
Next is honing our critical thinking skills.
Okay.
We can't just blindly accept everything we're told or go along with the crowd.
Right.
We need to question authority, challenge assumptions, and think for ourselves.
It reminds me of those Milgram experiments.
Yeah.
Those participants who went along with the instructions to administer those shocks,
Right.
even when they were clearly distressed?
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder of the danger of blind obedience.
Absolutely. We need to be able to say no when something feels wrong. Even when it means defying authority or going against the grain,
Yeah.
that takes courage.
For sure.
But it's a muscle we can all strengthen.
Right. And finally, there's the piece about cultivating personal responsibility.
Right.
It's not enough to simply be aware of these dynamics.
Yeah.
We have to be willing to act.
Exactly. We're not just passive observers in this world.
Right.
We have a responsibility to act when we see injustice, to speak up against cruelty,
Yeah.
to extend a helping hand to those who are suffering.
That's right.
It's about recognizing that our choices, both big and small, have consequences,
Right.
and that we have the power to make a difference.
It's about choosing to be the hero, not the bystander,
Exactly.
and instilling that sense of agency and responsibility in the next generation as well.
Absolutely. We need to teach our children to be compassionate, to think critically, and to have the courage to stand up for what they believe in.
Yes.
They need to know that they have the potential to be heroes in their own right, each and every one of them.
Wow, this has been an incredibly thought-provoking deep dive.
It has.
We've explored the dark side of human nature,
We have.
but we've also unearthed these glimmers of hope, these examples of incredible courage and resilience.
Absolutely.
It's been a real roller coaster of emotions.
It has.
The key takeaway here is that we all have the potential for both good and evil within us.
We do.
The choices we make, the actions we take, ultimately determine which path we follow.
And that's a powerful message.
It is.
It's a powerful reminder that the world needs our heroic imaginations now more than ever.
I agree.
We can choose to succumb to fear, hatred, and apathy.
Yeah,
Or we can choose to be the force for good, the change we want to see in the world.
absolutely. And that choice ultimately is up to each and every one of us.
It is.
What will you choose?
That is the question.
That's something for all of us to think about. This has been the deep dive.
It has.
A glimpse into the complexities of the human psyche, that potential for both darkness and light that resides within us all.
Until next time, remember, the world needs you be the hero.